On today's show, it's time, folks. Everyone's been talking about Jackson Merrill. We got to talk about him. Has he exceeded the expectations for when he was a prospect? Just a lowly old prospect. And the state of the Padres farm system, following not just the MLB draft, but their just scorched earth approach, as usual, from AJ Preller at the deadline, and some other names to keep an eye on, with my buddy, longtime guest, Aram Leighton. He's been on the show many times before. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Wednesday, September 4th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You may be familiar with my other baseball-related work over at the website Just Baseball, a fantastic website. Go check that out. You can also check me out on my other podcast, Baseball versus the World. And if you just want to, send me questions, whatever, at Javipedio on Twitter, the best handle of the game, dare I say, JAVIIPENO. But speaking of Just Baseball, today's guest, I mean, in my opinion, needs no introduction, but for those unfamiliar, he is the co-founder of Just Baseball, the website that I just mentioned earlier, and also a co-host on their flagship podcast, the Just Baseball Show, the prospect guru over at The Call Up, a prospects podcast for baseball talk. It's really, really great. My longtime friend who's been on the show 67 times, Aram Leighton. Sir, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Always excited for 68. But no, it's I have a lot of thank yous to give to the Padres for one, just mining so many gems and then trading them. So it gives us so much to talk about on the call up, which was a lot of fun. But they're going to load back up again, and I get to get excited about lower level prospects that they're pushing kind of quickly. So I'm already doing that, right? Like Leo De Vries star in the making here potentially, and then even what we're seeing at the big league level. So the Padres are great for prospect content creators.
I mean, yeah, just content in general, man. It's really, as much as I talked about this on a previous show, AJ Preller, if he were to, let's say theoretically the Padres blow it, they lose in the first round, and then he was to be fired, I will always be grateful for the content. This man was never boring at all. I think there was one off season, maybe. It was like the Nick Castellanos free agency. Like that was the only time he was a little boring. Remember like the Nick Martinez acquisition? I remember sending stuff in the chat like, oh, please. Like, is that all they're going to do? This is weird. And then it turned out okay, which was funny. And then his brother may or may not have attacked me on YouTube. Still unconfirmed reports in that regard. But let's start with a guy who you've been talking about for a very long time. And everybody go check out the Call Up, the YouTube page, and also the Twitter page as well for like these sort of clips. And in one of the clips, you've been really high on Jackson Merrill, but we all know he's good. But I want you to talk about like where he's grown and how has he exceeded the expectations that you had for him, and not just like his output, but like specifically like his ability to make contact or even power or stuff like that.
No, it's a great question. It's funny because I guess like the outlook on him, not in a negative or positive way, just in terms of like what type of player he is, what is his role going to be at the big league level, like what is he going to do, what position is he going to play, like that has changed so much, like over the several times I've seen him. The first time I saw him in person was in the Arizona Fall League, where he was grinding his butt off to turn into a good defensive shortstop, and I was floored. He was there early, watching him like get into his footwork. His arm was always solid. Just getting the ball out quick. And I was like, okay, this guy can play short. And then I talked to him a little bit after, and I think he was 19 at the time. And I'm like, okay, this guy is way ahead of his years. Like, this is a dude that's going to be a big leaguer. That was for sure. I had always loved the swing. And I think we always talk about the Padres. They nail swing mechanics, and that's why they do so well drafting. It's either pitching mechanics, swing mechanics. They're really good on that front. But I always kind of wondered how much power would be there. And then you started to see him grow into a little bit more and a little bit more. And, I think when I saw him this spring training was where I just realized this guy's going to be successful no matter what. Because that's when they first were really trying him in the outfield significantly and giving him looks in center. And I'm watching his reads pregame. This guy doesn't waste a rep. in batting
Mhm.
practice, getting live reads off the bat, just getting more comfortable. And I'm watching this guy already look absurdly comfortable in center field in spring training, and that's where I said, this guy's going to make the opening day roster. And that was the clip I think that
Mhm.
really circulated from the call up. But I meant it. Like, it wasn't just like hot take theater. It was, okay, I've seen this guy just blossom from 19 years old, being ahead of his years, to now 2021 being ahead of his years. And I think the thing that has been the most surprising, if I could pinpoint like two things, I likened him to Christian Yelich in the respect that I figured the power would come along maybe
Mhm.
year 3 of the big league
Mhm.
career.
Mhm.
I said, I think he's going to be a productive hitter no matter what. And he'll be an above average hitter. If you look back at like Yelich's first couple years with the Marlins, very good hitter, but it was contact over power, a lot of doubles and enough homers. I think he's tapped into more power than I would have expected this early. Again, I thought there was 25 plus home run upside as he blossoms, maybe get up to 30 because he's a little bit bigger than I think he gets credit for, long levers. But there was some challenges to elevate the ball consistently, and especially to the pull side. And then he cleans that up really quickly. And now you're seeing him really get into him to the pull side. So I would say the power exceeded my expectations. And then I knew he could hold it down in center after what I saw. I didn't think he'd be 7 outs
Yeah.
of average good in center field.
Yeah.
And then again, we could talk about the personality and how polished he is, sure, but this is a different beast. I've seen some of the most mature and polished young hitters get to the big leagues and they get overwhelmed. He's on a different level. So I would say everything that I was high on has somehow been pushed even higher.
Mhm.
And then, some of the things that I thought would come in maybe year 2 or 3 came in the second half. So I
Mhm.
think this whole process has just been quicker than I ever could have imagined with him. And I feel like we were at Just Baseball as high as anybody on him.
Absolutely, you were. And I think that, it's been like at least a month now of him really tapping into the isolated power numbers of the hard hit have been amazing. But for me, and this isn't going to help necessarily in his rookie of the year case, but for me, what's also been impressive is one, as just a Padres fan, we're so used to them calling up prospects really quickly and for them to come up and be like a CJ Abrams or a Mackenzie Gore, where there's still promise there, but it's like, okay, they're doing the thing where Preller accidentally forgot that you have to build out the rest of the team. So, all right, CJ, come up, Campuzano, come up. Your first at bat in the majors will be against prime Kenley Jansen. Good luck, that sort of thing. So I was surprised for him, not necessarily that he's better than, Trent Grisham. I feel like that wasn't necessarily a high bar to pass, at least offensively. But the other thing for me is also, and I don't know if this will help in his rookie of the year case. I don't understand how he's like the alpha personality on this team.
Yeah.
This is a team with Tatis, with Musgrove, with Cease, with Machado, with Bogarts, a World Series winner, like all these sort of guys on this team. And for him to come in, and I watch these games and it's like he's got a celebration that's different for each player. He's getting more excited seemingly for other players than himself. He has like just this heart of the line approach. And it's funny that you said, yeah, I talked to him when he was 19. What was that, like 3 months ago? Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the craziest part is this is a 21-year-old, not a rookie who came up at 26, which is, I feel like, a little bit more common than most. No, it's a 21-year-old kid who like is finally of legal drinking age, who seems like he's an alpha on a team with so many personalities. I think for me, that's been the most astonishing thing, even if it's not a statistical measurement.
I love that you bring that up, and just being able to see the impact that he's had on, I think, on the clubhouse has been huge as well. Where I think for these vets, man, it becomes, especially when you sign that mega deal, and the last couple of years have been a little bit disappointing, and you're surrounded by some other guys that have signed the mega deal, and everyone kind of has their routine, and not to say that they don't get along. Like I think clearly the clubhouse has really trended in the right direction over the last couple of years. But I think this youthful energy that he brings, I think invigorated everybody there. I think it invigorated, the vets too, because I think there's certain teams where you load up on a lot of stars and all of a sudden it just everyone kind of beats to their own drum, does their own thing. And you have this kind of individualized approach to the game that can, sometimes hold teams back. And I think that's something that we saw with like the Braves teams that had faltered at times too. I believe that. Again, it's kind of conjecture, but it's just based on people that I talk to that cover teams, players that have been in different clubhouses, all that good stuff, players that have been in World Series clubhouses. Sometimes it just takes that young player that reminds everybody, a little bit of the fun and joy that's in the game. Like I guarantee Merrill reminds Machado a little bit of like, his love for the game when he first came up. Of course, very different personalities, but the passion that he plays with, I'm sure Xander sees that and it's like, oh yeah, like I remember that passion that I had when I came up and made an impact and helped the Red Sox win the World Series. Like I really do believe, and those were two guys that came up very young as well. And so I think it's easy to get away from that. And I really think Merrill has reeled them in. And I think has really set the tone of, hey, this is a game and this is fun. And this is something that we're really fortunate to be playing. And not to say that they fully got away from that, but, I think sometimes having that 20-year-old tone setter that's fearless out there, that rises to the occasion, that's infectious. And it's funny, people talk about veteran leadership in the clubhouse. Sometimes it's good to have that youthful energy in the clubhouse as well. And I think in the past, some of those youthful players were maybe overwhelmed. And I think seeing Merrill not be overwhelmed at all, and they all know how hard it is to learn center field and do all the things that he's doing. Seeing him not be overwhelmed and have that youthful energy, I really think has changed the vibe for the Padres and has set a tone. So yeah, he might have a 4.5 win season here if you look at F4, but it's cliche, but it's beyond the box score, I think, with what Merrill's done. And that's why he's a no-brainer rookie of the year for me.
Absolutely, man. Unfortunately, we'll have to see. The one thing he is missing is the famous girlfriend, and Jeff Passan tweets about him. So we'll have to see if he wins it. But folks, we're not just talking about Jackson Merrill. Let's talk about the rest of the Padres farm system, including your Salas and your De Vries and your, oh God, is that it? Well, we're going to find out in just a second, guys. But first, let me take a second to talk to you about our lovely, lovely friends and folks over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers to exhaust kits, LED headlights, carpet, whatever you want. They have you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You always find exactly what you want: speed, power, whatever you want. They got you covered over there, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need, go check it out, ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay's guaranteed fit, which is used to help guarantee that it will fit your vehicle. It's really, really great. Check that out. It gives you a little check mark to make sure you didn't buy the wrong part. If you're an idiot like me and don't know anything about cars, that's really great. It is available only to U.S. customers, though, so check that out, guys. eBay Motors, we love you. And just like that, we are back here thriving and vibing, as always, into segment number 2 of this here podcast. Aram, here's the thing. I'm going to be mean for a second. I almost don't care what you're about to say about the Padres farm system upcoming. And the reason I say that is because we've been doing this for so long that the farm system seems to just not matter to AJ Preller. He's like, you know what? I'm going to draft high schoolers. They're going to somehow be awesome. I'll find one in the 8th round, whatever. And then I trade them to get Dylan Cease. I really do think that while AJ Preller does all these big time moves, it's gotten almost underrated and, almost a meme, but it's true that he keeps doing all these trades, more trades, and especially blockbuster ones, in nearly every team in the sport. And they seem to regenerate their farm system. Deadpool and Wolverine just came out, like that level of healing, right? So what can you tell us? Let's start off first with the obvious ones that I think that everyone knows that are really exciting, and that's Ethan Salas and Leodalis De Vries. I will preface it by saying that Aram was a little bit lower on Ethan Salas than some other folks last year. And I think that we've seen, might have been right, he's still a very raw prospect. But what can you tell us about the young future, hopefully, star catcher for the San Diego Padres?
Well, and you bring up a good point. Like when we get like deep in the depth of the system, like, oh, this guy's, looks like a good find, or this guy is, maybe performing very well and is a breakout. Like those are the guys that typically end up getting moved. But Preller does have kind of like those quote unquote untouchables, at least, that have to really be pried away in like a Juan Soto type of situation. But I thought there was a reason why Merrill wasn't moved in that deal, and a reason why they've just continued to hold on to Merrill. They knew that this player could be there. And I think De Vries is in that conversation. I think, Salas could be in that conversation to them. And, with Salas, I'll start on like more the less positive. I wouldn't say negative, because he's been a lot better of late. We got a lot of, that was probably one of the prospects that we got the most pushback, and it's relatively lower, where we just don't have him in the top 20, and he slipped now to the mid range of the top 100. But I remember when we didn't, we had him in the 30 range, 35 range going into this year. People were like, he's a top 10 prospect, blah blah blah. Very well could be, but I just got to see more. The defense is great, and I think that really does give him a high floor as, a potential big league catcher. I feel very confident with that, especially with figure the bat's going to develop and come along, and the swing decisions have gotten better and better. But yeah, he has really struggled with secondary stuff as he's been aggressively assigned and aggressively pushed. And it's been very difficult to be able to really assess what he can do because of the way that he has been handled as a prospect. But I think if you look at the last 30 games, all of a sudden Salas looks a lot better. I think he's got about a 740 OPS over those last 30 games in high A. And I've been just waiting for that because through the first half of the season, there really was not any shift. Like there really wasn't any tangible improvement. And maybe it just takes a while for a guy that's so aggressively pushed. And I think we're starting to see that shine through a little bit more now, where he's starting to put together some better numbers. But yeah, I think with Salas at this point, it's just a wait and see thing. And he has plenty of time. And that's why I think some are so high on him. But for me, I wanted to tread a little more lightly because they got to do it, right? They got to show something. De Vries, which we'll get to, like he's showed things already and bigger flashes where, Salas, again, he could end up being a top 10 prospect in the game in a year or so. But, I'd rather make that correction back upwards than just say, hey, we're going to throw him in the top 10 because he's really polished for his age and is being assigned very aggressively. Because, I do wonder how much upside is fully there. But what I will say is he's starting to show that he can hit the ball a little bit harder. And you never know what he's going to look like a year from now, given that he just turned 18 years old. So plenty to like. And I think the finish to this year is encouraging, not striking out and starting to do some things a lot better. But, for me, I just wanted to see a little bit more because at this point we just had not really seen him perform. But you could see the flashes and the polish, but there's plenty of times where we've seen that with players and it hasn't fully come together. I think Salas won't be that at all. That's why he's still a top 100 guy. And he's by far the worst numbers of any guy in our top 100 ever. So I think that says enough in itself. But yeah, it's going to be a really interesting offseason then going into next year where you're going to want to see, that leap next year as he gets into, closer to 19 years old, 20 years old, and goes from there. Like that, once he gets to 19 in high A, that's assuming he repeats there or they send him to double, then there's going to be another adjustment period. So then how do you fully assess there? Like there's a lot of difficulty, I think, in assessing Salas, but I do think that this is a big league catcher one way or another.
Yeah. And that's really exciting. I like what you said about the defense. Padres fans have been, they've been coming for our guy, man. Luis Campusano, it just seems like it's not happening. The defense. And I think that's why you've seen some fans asking more and more. And I think there's been a bias among Padres fans who are like, no, see, ignore that Aram Leighton has him at 65. I trust MLB.com. They have it at 19, almost because they desperately want their catcher of the future, because with Kyle Higashioka being a free agent after the season, Elias Diaz, whatever happens with him, and Campusano just seems like he took not just a step back offensively, but the defense didn't improve at all. So I think that there is a lot of pressure and a lot of excitement on this particular prospect. And I can't wait to see what happens, but I don't know if this is a guy who's ready for next year. I think, and that's I just don't see it, man. Like, I think that would be a disaster.
Just adjusting the high A, like just now looking like he can be a league average hitter in high A. Again, that's really impressive for an 18-year-old. And I think people really underestimate the catching side of things. Like there's been so many prospects like a Campusano who, then stall out at the big leagues a little bit. And then it takes a couple years. And then how many catchers you see at like 26, 27 start to figure it out, especially like former top prospects too. It's a slower burn. And I think that's why people are very excited about Salas is he's so ahead of his peers in that regard. But on the flip side of that, like he's going to have a huge adjustment period everywhere he goes. And he's just now kind of had this shift that we've been waiting for where, how many games at this point has he played in high A between, the end of last year and this year? I know he got some games in double A as well at the end of last year. Like it's been a pretty sizable amount of ball games. Again, I'm not like holding it against him because he shouldn't have even been there in the first place. He should just let him continue to go in low A and then play the second half of this year in high A. But now that we're just seeing that improvement, there's going to be a similar learning curve in double. So I just think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves if we're fully assessing this player before we really see what the more polished and better version of him looks like as he starts to get more acclimated. But I get it also because the defense is so good for his age. The fact that he's surviving and putting the ball in play and has flashed some decent EVs is encouraging. Like there's a lot to like there. But, I think we got to see it come together a little bit more before he's, a top 20, 30 prospect in the game for me, but still a really, really good prospect and not a guy I would want to move in any situation.
And they did not move him. And I'm looking forward to them rushing him to be the starting day opening catcher of 2025. But no, in all seriousness, that should be a really interesting one to note. And then we got to talk about Leodalis De Vries. He's someone that's just been raking for a while now, it feels like, especially in the minors. I get a highlight of this guy every other day. And I think that he's another one to keep an eye out in a similar position vacancy situation that the Padres had have at catcher, which is why everyone's excited about Salas, with Hassan Kid being a free agent. I mean, hey, maybe Mason McCoy is this guy who's going to be the nice stopgap between. Who knows? He's had a productive 13 games so far. But what can you tell us about De Vries? Because he is the higher ranked prospect, I believe, number 15. I should have wrote this down before.
Yes.
On the Just Baseball Top 100.
Yeah, and I mean that's we don't like to push lower level guys too high, like too quickly for all the reasons that we just said. But with a guy like De Vries, it was a no-brainer, I think, when you're looking at the top prospects in this game. How can you not look at a 17-year-old here that's doing what he's doing in low A over the course of the season? How much better he got in the second half. And it's what makes the injury that cut his season short even more frustrating. But rumors are that he's going to go to the Arizona Fall League, which should be a blast. I can't wait to see him there and make up for some of that lost time. But a switch hitting shortstop with, who's flashing already, I think above average power. I think he's going to grow into plus power. And we've clearly seen a really advanced approach, which you just don't see from a 17-year-old switch hitter who's getting assigned aggressively, and not quite as aggressively, but still being in full season ball at 17 is pretty crazy. Running a chase rate below 20%. I mean, over his final 40 games before the injury, had a 963 OPS. So this dude, between the swing decisions, between the ability to elevate consistently, like this guy's hitting in the air very often. And I think the defense has come along, and he looks like a guy that could stick it short. If he moves to third, then he could be very solid there, but I think he can stick it short. The instincts he has for the game, all that good stuff. Like, I was floored every time I checked in on this guy. And the one nitpick is, I like to see the left-handed swing catch up a little bit more to the right-handed swing, but both jumped over the final couple months of the season where, he improved from both sides of the plate. It just was a disproportionate leap from the right side, where if you look since, I believe if we go back to like July 1st, I mean, this dude from the left side had a 907 OPS, which is crazy. From the right side, it was 1162, which is nuts. But if you go like larger sample size, like just the whole season, from the right side at 855 OPS, left side was 782. So still pretty close. But the fact that right-handed swing is already where it's at is pretty remarkable. You always want to see the guys that are switch hitters be a little bit further along from the left side. I think it's just naturally he gets into the backside a bit better from the right side because he's right side dominant. But the fact that both swings got better as the year progressed and more productive as the year progressed, and his EVs went up and he continued to elevate, like, this guy is a superstar in the making potentially.
Can't wait. I think with him, it's going to be interesting to see what exactly the Padres do at shortstop, because for me, spending a lot of money elsewhere, I'd rather not spend, a lot of money on a shortstop if you might have someone like De Vries there already. So we're going to see how they approach that. I think that's an underrated subplot for the Padres this coming up off season. So very excited about that. 2 golden egg prospects, but we got to talk about the rest of them, and we got to talk about the draft and maybe some under the radar names in just one moment, folks. First, I got to mention to you one of our favorite sponsors here on the show, Prize Picks. Here's the thing. Football's coming up. You all know it. Baseball's still here, obviously, but football's coming up. And basically, Prize Picks is the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Over 5 million active members. And all you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. Watch the winnings roll in. And speaking of football, 1 Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 automatic win on Prize Picks. I mean, technically not automatic, but you guys get my point. Every week in September. That's right. Only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football in September. 4 weeks of free W's. You don't want to miss out on that. They've also got you and all sorts of stuff across every sport. They've got some fun, community plays with Joe Budden, Drewski. You folks have heard of him before from the memes and whatnot, and through everything else. You could go check that out. You can 100 times your money. It's available in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. We love Prize Picks very, very much. Go check it out. Use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks. to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't want to miss it. Prize Picks, run your game. But also, speaking of game, I want to talk about another favorite sponsor of this show, and that is the good folks over at Game Time. Here's the thing. Aram, myself, we're going to games all the time. I just went to a game in Philly, possibly why I got sick. But nonetheless, Game Time is not the reason for that. And what I love about them so much is the prices can go down closer to kickoff, first pitch, tip off, whatever it is your kind of preferred sport. That's what's really great about them. And it's not just sports. Comedy, theater, concerts, all sorts of stuff. They've got you covered, and they filter out all the fluff and give you incredible flash deals, zone deals. You just pick a zone in the stadium, and then you let them pick the seat for you, and they give you a discount. All sorts of cool stuff. They let you view the seats. Prize Picks, or not Prize Picks, Game Time. Got my sponsorships mixed up there for a second, but go check that out, guys. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Game Time, Locked On MLB, $20 off your first purchase. What time is it? It's Game Time. Go check it out. And just like that, everybody, we are thriving and vibing here into segment number 3. Let's talk the rest of the farm system, man, because we went through the headliners. It's exciting. It's like, oh man, you've got some ace pitchers, but then, oh god, what happens after that? Besides De Vries and Salas, following also the MLB draft as well, with Kash Mayfield being their first round pick, what's kind of the state of the Padres farm system right now?
Obviously it's thinner, but when you've got two blue chip prospects like Salas and De Vries, it's always a great start. And then I think it's going to be interesting to see how some of these prospects develop out of the draft. Kash Mayfield was one of my favorite arms in the class, especially out of the high school group. Another guy, just really smooth delivery, great feel for 3 pitches. And I'm really excited to see him throw once he makes his pro debut. But I think this is a guy that, is kind of cut from the Snelling cloth in the respect that he could probably hit the ground running in pro ball and climb rather quickly. I know Snelling stalled out a little bit this year, but overall, I think it was very impressive what he was able to do as a teenager. And when you look at Kash Mayfield, it's, I think, above average fastball, above average slider, above average changeup, and potential for plus control. Like, if you have that, you're going to fly through the minors pretty quickly, and you're a high probability big league starter. So I think Mayfield's going to be a guy that's on top 100 lists by, middle part of next year. So that definitely helps. And then I think just pitching wise, like, they've just got some interesting irons in the fire. Like Ryan Bergert's been solid this year.
I was going to ask you about him.
Yeah. I think that's a guy that could project as like a back end of the rotation arm still, or at least as a big league role in one way or another as a reliever. I thought being able to get Boston Bateman was interesting, right? Very projectable in terms of what the stuff can be. I don't think there's much more projection in his 6'7", 250-pound frame. But I mean, by the way, guys nicknamed like Sasquatch. So he's a monster. Like, that's a guy that I think in the right development system here, like, and with some of the right improvements, like, that fastball could be monstrous. He has a banger curveball. So, like, I'm interested there. And then a deep cut that I think is a very underrated addition to their system is Humberto Cruz, who they signed for $750,000 out of Mexico in international free agency. And I really do think that this is a guy that could be that next kind of breakout, like, big name in the Padres system that no one had really heard about before. I think we saw him only for a couple innings at the complex, but the fastball was sitting 95. He's got good secondary stuff, nasty slider. So I think that's a guy that we could see kind of make that leap as well. And then you've got just some good filler arms, I think, that have had nice years throughout the system that help balance it out and give it some depth. Like, Brandon Nett or Isaiah Lowe. Isaiah Lowe, I think, has been a good one as well. It's put together a pretty nice season.
Absolutely. And I think that with this Padres farm, but look, I like what you bring up there, that by the end of next year, Kash Mayfield on there. That's just kind of what I expect. I'm expecting some name to be on there and just sneak their way in. Who's going to be the next Graham Pauley type of player that I just get excited about, who's then, sent into the woodshed, cast into the mountain and of Mordor, and just Preller's vicious, man. This man does not care. But I do want to also talk about Ryan Bergert for a second, because with Bergert, one, he had a great start in Double-A somewhat recently, a few weeks ago, where he struck out like 8 across 6 innings. He has had, just on the raw numbers, a little bit of a decline, not randomly, but in his strikeout rate. He was nearly 30% for like 4 different seasons across, multiple different levels. Do you think that there's any cause for concern there?
No, I think some of that was a little bit inflated, with the performance in high A. And then
Mhm,
I think also there's been more of a focus for him this year to just fill up the zone. I think he knows he's a guy that's probably going to, you know, he's not going to be a 29% strikeout rate guy at the big league level, right? And I think that's what he
mhm,
was in 2023. But he also walked 11% of batters. That's something
mhm,
that'll really burn you at the big league level, especially if you can't sustain that, high strikeout rate. So I think it's been more of him just pitching to contact. And I think
mhm,
that's been something that you could probably now adjust back and say, okay, I can maybe expand a bit more with the slider, get guys to chase a little bit more. But I think there was a concerted effort and he cut his walk rate to 8% this year. So I think that was the focus. So I don't have a ton of concern there because I think ultimately the strikeout rate was always going to settle in the low 20s. I'd like to see it get up there a little bit more. And I think again that'll come with being willing to now go back out and expand a little bit more and see if guys will be willing to chase that slider and
mhm,
chase that curveball. But I'm more encouraged by the fact that he's cut that walk rate by 3%, because
mhm.
that's something that will more directly affect you at the big league level unless you're guaranteed to rack up the whiffs at an elite clip. And I don't think Bergert ever was going to do that. And I think the underlying numbers on a lot of his stuff look pretty good. I think there might be a little bit of a pitch usage adjustment that could help him. The curveball seems to be performing pretty well. I'd like to see him throw it more. So little tweaks
Mhm.
like that could help him. But in terms of the strikeout rate, I'll take that if it's a decrease in the walk rate. And we're talking about a guy that isn't giving up a ton of bombs or anything like that in the Texas League. Fly ball pitcher, only 7 home runs. So I'm encouraged by the fact that he's pounding the zone more.
It's going to be really interesting to follow the Padres. I think, especially pitching prospects, it's always interesting. I'm fascinated because they gave up Snelling. He's been doing okay, for your team, whatever. But giving up both him and Lesko, it makes you wonder, like, are they like, screw it, we're going to keep a Cease, keep a Michael King? That will be another subplot to follow for the Padres this coming off season. Because they gave up their future pitchers, are they going to extend a Michael King or a Dylan Cease? I think that'll be really interesting. Last question. Brandon Valenzuela. I'm wondering, we talked about this before with the catching prospect situation, with the fact that Higashioka is a free agent, with the fact that Campuzano, as evidenced by that bring in Elias Diaz, might not be panning out. Is there anything to expect from that guy potentially being a storyline to follow as not some star catcher, but someone who can, fill in the gap between, now and when Ethan Salas is ready?
I think so because look, is he going to hit? Probably not. Is he a disaster at the plate? No, not that either. But I don't think he's much of an offensive force. But the defense is so solid there, and you've talked about like there's just the need for that, right? Like this is a guy that I think receives well, great arm. I think can limit the running game pretty well. And I think if you're looking for someone that can just hold it down, uh, that's a guy that I think you could feel pretty confident with at least being able to provide the defensive side of things. And that's
Mhm,
the most important part of the equation here, right?
mhm,
So I think the back can continue to come along. I know it's a guy that the Padres have liked for a while. And, if he can get going a little bit more offensively, it would be a lot more encouraging. It's been really rough, I think, in the second half in terms of the bat. But I also think there's been a big focus in AAA, especially to just prove that he can be that defender and prove that he can be a guy that can play a big league defensive catcher. Ultimately, I think he's a backup, but if that's a
mhm.
guy that's giving you a plus defense back there and is hitting in your 9 hole, I think you can palate the poor offense. But I will say it is a little bit concerning that he has struggled this much in the PCL,
Mhm,
and that does say something about I think where the offense is at. But with a full offseason to work with that, maybe I assume he'd be spending, probably the entire spring training with the big league club this coming year. Maybe that offense can come along a little bit to just, if he's an 85, 90 WRC plus guy, I think he'll
mhm,
provide more than enough value with the
mhm,
glove to be, a fill-in catcher, solid backup. And I still think they should bring somebody else back, but he's definitely a guy that could
mhm.
fill. I think they should bring Higashioka back, but he's definitely a guy
I
that
do
could
too.
fill the backup
I did
role
too.
without a
Mhm.
doubt.
Yeah, we'll see, but that is another subplot to follow for the Padres. Some exciting stuff on the horizon. While the farm system hasn't been depleted, it seems like there's at least options, and at least the major league team is really good. So,
Yes.
crossing fingers, at least it looks like they're not in a position that I feel like they've been in past years where you like need people to come up. And everyone has been coming up lately, especially bullpen arms, Alec Jacob, Sean Reynolds had 5Ks and 1 1/3 the other day. So really exciting stuff for the Padres all around. Always exciting, of course, talking to you, Aram, though. What do you want to plug for the good people out there?
Just baseball show, of course, every single day, giving you everything you need to know in the baseball world. Of course, justbaseball.com. We're putting out articles every single day as well, covering all 30 teams and prospect stuff as well. Plenty of content that we're putting out there, and I'm writing up all of these guys. And then the Call Up, our prospect podcast, where we can keep you up to date with everything going on, who's performing, promotions, all that good stuff. That's available on all platforms as well. But Avi, as always, thanks for having me on, man.
Of course, man. Go check out Aram as well at Aram Leighton 8 on Twitter. Really good follow, especially if you want to keep up on prospect stuff. And with that all said, everybody, that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to subscribe wherever you get your shows from. Follow me on Twitter at Javapeno. Send me your questions if you'd like to answer for next week's mailbag. And then also stay tuned to Just Baseball as well. I'll be writing some articles there about the Padres bullpen. And randomly, if you care about Victor Robles of the Mariners, I'm obsessed with him personally. So look forward to that. But until that next time, stay safe. And of course, stay faithful. My Fire Faithful homies. Take care.